right. Good day, everyone. It's a pleasure to have all of you guys here. This is Captain Fahad Ibne Masood. I'm hosting this session of the full crew. We are going to focus core on AI and its relationships with aviation and thereabout. It's heartening to have such a strong audience with us and a strong panel as well. We're waiting on a participant, but let's see how things go about that side of the world. On the other hand, we've seen that AI has taken the world by storm. The powerhouse of panelists that we have here are going to generate a lot of effect, a lot of strong points as well. I would like to go ahead and talk about the initial sponsors. We've been backed up by Teal, Carasoft, Echodyne, all three of them. Very kind to have their backing. And as we go into our intros, we have Jesse Hamel. He's founder and CEO of Victus Technologies, MIT grad, former Spectre pilot, AC-130. He's bringing in a lot of combat aviators perspective to synthetic GPS and autonomous resilience. Number two, we have Chris Sniffen from Snorkel AI, specializes in the programmatic labeling and evaluation frameworks that keep complex AI agents grounded in truth and integrity. Last but not the least, we have Dr. Marina. We are expecting her to join, but if she's here, I would like to introduce her as well. She's chief scientist of data management and analytics at CNA, an expert in the AI trust fabric. And this is hugely required for the machine speed operations that we have from today. So, this is where we stand as we speak. But let's look at a few more important elements. I would like to bring in the first article from the word get go. Jesse, you've taken up the China's AI vision and the New York Times piece where it mentions move fast but obey the rules. China's vision for dominating AI. This certainly highlights the tension between one, aggressive innovation, and two, absolute state control. This is where China has really played a role. Your opinion on this? Why is this specific Chinese model such a critical signal for one, defense, and two, tech sectors right now? Your perspective on it, please. Jesse,
Yeah.
you have the.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. Thanks for the intro and for the opportunity. Yeah, this is, one from a national security perspective, the CCP is the pacing threat. So we have to be analyzing this. And if you think of, I believe we're in the early kind of dawn of the age of robotic warfare and agentic warfare. So there's kind of two broad things. We can, one, learn from another near peer that is struggling and grappling through actually some of the same issues that we're talking about in DC and some other areas. Where do the large tech companies have control over, super intelligence versus a nation state versus, human kind of individual freedoms and or their right to agency and versus what do we allow like the algorithms to program. So when you read this article, one thing I thought was interesting about it is that they're having the same policy conversations that we are, like the exact same ones. So one, I think just an immediate takeaway is that we're in uncharted territory. This is non-obvious, and just because of a certain background, ethnicity, flag, constitution that you have, like this is a new world that we're thinking about. So I think it's important. We can actually get things, we can get things right or wrong sometimes from observing. Secondly, I think this article, I think there's real opportunities for the U.S. approach within just broader AI, both for national security and for prosperity, which I think we can kind of tease out with this. But I think it's a really important conversation. One thing that is powerfully unifying on both sides of the hill and from LA to Ankara is I don't think we want to live in a world where the Communist Chinese Party has better AI tools and super intelligence than the free West does. I don't think we want to live in that world. That's a very dangerous world. So thinking about how we maintain and continue to expand upon our advantages, which is very much a civil military issue, very much is, I think is actually really important.
So I certainly agree with you. What um, China has been doing really well, in my humble opinion, is that they have facilitated the universities. For example, the USTC's quantum chips, the Chomsky 3.0, that's really pushed the envelope for the world of AI. As we understand, classical computing is limiting AI's capability, competencies, and where quantum comes in, then it's going to go completely out of control. So in your opinion, how do we manage this? How does the West manage this freedom, well, relative freedom, to generate computing power beyond what classical computing is doing?
Yeah, I mean it's a good way of thinking about it, and you know, quantum broadly is a in a lot of areas it's a very big bet too. So when you put investments into that, there's an opportunity cost of where those investments did not go. What I think I actually think there's also some bridging. There's some interesting research being done at a few labs too on bridging classical versus compute. That definitely will drive and has influence on agentic warfare. I'll highlight just that piece of it. What I think, just from thinking about kind of some of the questions posed by this article and broader discussion points here, this idea of harnessing laboratory-based breakthroughs and then transitioning them to what I'll say is commercialization. This is something that the U.S. has an imperative that we have to do faster than the CCP. So we have to do that faster than a centralized economy. That is easier said than done. There's some ways to do this that I think involve kind of some taking advantage of incentives that the U.S. has with kind of private and public efforts, both on the software side and then what you're talking about, developing the hardware, because quantum is very much a hardware challenge. So developing the hardware behind it, I think that investment has to happen. But if I was drilling it down to one area where the U.S. has got to dominate, and that is to be able to put some kind of funding and a diverse portfolio of, call them bets. Those are hardware and software ones on compute, a classical AI, quantum AI. There's some other areas, right? Both software and hardware. Put some bets in kind of a broad de-risk portfolio on this, and they'd be able to rapidly transition that into operational use, into even commercial areas. That will be the key, because I agree with you. Otherwise, you will end up having a situation where, and this is where we have to be very clear-eyed. The Chinese are trying to do this, and they have a similar strategy where a lot of these labs are, whether it's for the U.S. side, an FRDC or a UARC or some other kind of partnership like this, where they might put some investment into this area, but then it just dies in the lab. And I think the policy piece that DC has got to figure out and get right and work with the public sector on this. And this is my bias, but I think venture-backed startups are a key part of this, that we have to be able to rapidly commercialize and transition that tech. That's actually, from a system dynamics perspective, that's what will keep us at the vanguard and the frontier of super intelligence.
Yes, and it's not going to be the easiest way forward. Sorry, I hope I'm not cutting you there, Jesse.
No, good to go.
All right. So first of all, I would like to welcome Dr. Marina as well. Good to have you here. Finally, we connect. And technology fails us when we need it the most. That is where the challenge always lies. So
Exactly.
it's always good to have competent professionals. And we've had our brief entrees in the start as well. But it's good to have you here, Dr. Marina. On the other hand, I would certainly push another point or perspective. I was going through this article. And there was this very important element which mentions the regulatory side, and it's stated regulations have been built into the business model, where firms are acting as censors as well. What is your take on that, Jesse?
Well, the first one, That's happening in the US as well. It's happening in the US as well. And it starts with just the pace of innovation is so breakneck that the regulators can't keep up. They cannot keep up. So if you want to think about, like, if we're concerned about a TikTok algorithm corrupting the minds of American youth, for example, then you have to understand, like, agentically how that's determined and be able to influence that. That is something that there's a delta between, like, government regulators that are theoretically in that position versus industry professionals and other private sector folks that are just closer to the problem set and the technology. It's proximity to the technology. So I don't think that's going to change. I think that's actually going to keep expanding. I think you're on a kind of a very interesting change in how we're going to have to do public-private partnerships in a way where regulators are going to have to depend on kind of like a variety of industry experts. You're already seeing this happen. And I think part of it, a way to help with this is kind of, we got to be very careful of this, but thinking carefully about how we can rapidly take somebody from the private sector, put them into a public sector position, and then also transition public sector into the private sector one. This is also dangerous if not done right. There's a reason we have cool-off laws. There's a reason we have these, so it's very dangerous, but it's also, I think it's necessary to relook at this. The system that we have now was not built for this kind of tech advance. It just wasn't.
So I would certainly conclude the discussion and the article as well. We need to trade speed versus safety and political control. Policies have to come into place. Money makes the mayor go. Strategic influences have to come in. Policy decisions, as I mentioned before, they need to be correct. Dr. Marina, I would like to pull you into this discussion, if you allow me. In your opinion, does this tight control that is modeled by China and its AI more predictable, or is it more dangerous for global security, international stability? What is your take on it?
It's a very, very interesting question. I'm not sure that I'm not so familiar with the geopolitical situations, but I know that I always boil things back down to kind of data management questions. And are we aware of, regardless of how the tools were created, there's always concerns about, how is AI being trained? Is there bias being introduced? What's the quality of the data? But when we're going to implement and we're going to actually use these tools, what is the supply chain here? Are we also, where is the data being hosted? So whether we, if we bring these tools in, is the data then going to be sent back outside of our country, right? So maybe there are things we can do to kind of mitigate where there's some deployments locally. And it really comes back to a similar question we have with foreign-made drones. What are the risks being introduced with the data being sent? Are we exposing critical infrastructure? Are we exposing our personal identities? Or is there information being exposed about the people that are using these tools? We're talking now about agents and various tools.
Taken. So it's a challenging proponent for the global international security rule-based orders that we have right now. There are new paradigms which are coming in, and policy strategy, grand strategy is something where things can make sense and make things more predictable for the rest of the world, may it be the West or the East. Let's take this to our next article. I would like to bring in Dr. Marina's select. This is related to identity for the AI era. Dr. Marina, your article moves us to the... Say again, sorry. Oh, pardon me for that. Chris, excuse me for missing out. I was thinking on a few more things, but Chris, your perspective, let's take your input on this article that Jesse has come in with.
No, thanks. It's a really interesting article. And I think I would just kind of summarize a little bit of what you and Jesse were already talking about. The the CCCP can, or the CCP rather, can centralize a lot of the things that are foundational to AI. So AI takes a stack of different technologies. You talked about hardware earlier, and Marina just talked about data. There's also things like energy. We've seen a lot of talk in recent news about how energy concerns are actually going to drive data centers into outer space, right? So the fact that China can marshal all of those different layers of the stack together does create a formidable, I think, challenge to the US, where we're going to ultimately be able to prevail. And where we're going to make a difference is what Jesse was alluding to earlier, right? Being able to make a variety of bets using venture-backed innovation, right? When we can make 1,000 bets, whereas I think the temptation over in China is going to be to centralize on a smaller number. So thanks for that.
Thank you. So once again, the idea is to generate partnerships which are value adding. Make sure everybody's on the same frequency and we're generating maximum effect and bang for the buck, as we call it. But thank you, Chris, for the input there. Pardon me for interluding you earlier. Coming back to Dr. Marina's article, and Dr. Marina, if I were to ask you, re-ask you, the article that you selected has, it moves us from the organizational core, which is, sorry if I'm missing out something. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right. Fine. So rethinking identity for the AI era. ID is one of the core features of our normal human beings' lives. And the advocation there of AI trust fabric. Why have you selected this article? To my personal question out of the read that I did, why are our current human-centric ID systems falling apart as we move toward thousands of autonomous agents, made be APIs and the lot? The floor is yours.
Thank you. Yeah, so I found this article really interesting in some of my work. So I guess to take a step back, since I missed the introduction, and apologize for that. So I work for CNA. We're a not-for-profit research analysis organization, and we work with government clients on a variety of data-centric issues. And so I've been working with the federal government on how identity and access management is applied to a number of systems that are kind of crossing the boundary between federal and industry. And so I found this article really interesting because, you know, we're all enjoying using LLMs and various AI agents with so many different tasks, but are we thinking about how it's exposing all of the data that it's really rapidly digesting in that process? So we have, you know, in identity and access management, we have user-based systems, we have system-based access. And the whole tenet of something you know, something you have, something you are, kind of breaks down, in my opinion, with an agent, because how can, you know, can we prove what it is, right? So there's kind of a fundamental question of how are we going to identify these agents? Are they computer systems, or is there a third category that's needed because of, you know, the speed, also the personas that they take on? They might react differently in different cases. And, you know, with software development, we really emphasize logging to make sure that we have traceability, that we have, we're able to audit what happened. Can you do that as easily with an AI agent?
Good. That's very value adding. I was going through this article, and there's this phrase terminology that is, if you can shed some light on that. So random person off the street, that analogy, if you can shed some light on this related to AI agents in the network that we have, what is that all about?
Yes, absolutely. So with, you know, thinking about when we're designing systems for users, we have often in the federal government space, we have authorized users, right? They have a certain level of access because of, you know, their position, their clearance, et cetera. And so enabling an agent to have complete access to all of your information within seconds is kind of like giving a person off the street access to all this information, right? You're not granularly looking through, is this a need to know? Is there enough reasoning to give this this agent access? So I think that's what that relates to.
Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. So, in my humble opinion, as I was going through this, we need to move towards one, dynamic, two, cryptographic, and three, strong identity layers. There is no other way around it in my take on it. I would like to bring in Chris here. Chris, if you can, uh, if we when we talk about ID or identity and access, how much of that trust starts with the programmatic labeling of the data these agents are trained on? In your opinion, what's your take on this?
No, that's a really good question. I think it all comes back to the data for AI, always, right? Being able to programmatically label that data and use it for your training data is one thing, but ultimately, the thing that makes even bigger difference is how well you're evaluating it on the use cases that you have. So if you have an agentic system that is going to draft an email for you, change something in your calendar, you have to have a lot of confidence in how it behaves. And ultimately, the only way that you're able to have confidence in how an AI or an agentic system behaves is having good evaluations where you can repeatedly demonstrate that it's going to do exactly what you think it's going to do, right? And that kind of evaluation is what builds trust in the system. Could I ask one quick question? Because I find this is a fascinating article
Go
as
ahead,
well.
please. Yes.
And so, Marina, I'm just curious from your perspective, right? The kind of old paradigm for a lot of this, we had NPE certs, right? So if you have a server that's going to reach out and check your email inbox on the main server, right? You're going to issue certificates to maybe at the application level, but that doesn't seem to be quite sufficient for AI. And I'm just curious as to whether you think that's really going to change and there's going to be another category of persona. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I absolutely. Yeah, because I think the persona is exactly, I think, what you're alluding to, right? That because there's kind of an element of there is the NPE perspective. This is a connection, presumably through an API, but you also have the variations of, in this case, you're having this conversation and the agent has gone and maybe acted in a certain way that I wouldn't act with a different person. So I think that's really a challenging question to address. How do you capture all these nuances that we're getting with agents and various LLMs?
So I certainly believe there are challenges, and with challenges come opportunities. Jesse, in your opinion, which opportunity stands waiting for us in this domain?
Yeah, like I take a little bit of a black pilled approach to this. I think a lot of the trust is mostly dead and it's not coming back, not anytime soon, maybe never. So what I think, 24 months ago, there's a lot of folks talking about ZK architecture for this. I think it's actually the opposite of this. It's 100% trust. So how do you get to that? It's going to be all about the source. So I think because you won't be able to trace it and it'll all be black boxed at some level. And that to include like the formations of agents and the manner that they collaborate to make decisions and what their influences are, there already are almost impossible to ID, and we're just starting. Like if anybody has clawbots on a Mac Mini, like you can't trace any of that, and you're not going to get anywhere close to it. So it's probably, honestly, I think it's probably a fool's errand to try and reverse engineer that. If anybody's claiming that is probably snake oil. So I think that instead it's going to be about the output of it. There's probably some ways we can benchmark hallucinations, maybe some other things on that too that could be, useful, like trust ratings, if you will. And then it's probably going to be like a lot of things that there'll be a cluster of organizations that will have built up trust. It'll be easily destroyed, but just like a human, they will have built up trust over a certain period, and that trust will be the opportunity for definitely monetization for sure. Will be through that kind of mechanism. It won't be because it'll be easily explainable. That I don't think that'll be it at all. It'll be you're just gonna have to trust us because we've proven the results, and you got to keep trusting us.
True. Black boxing, I believe, is one of the core challenges of AI right now. We don't really know what's happening in the background of things, and how the systems are working. The various codes, the algorithms that have been, the biases that have come in already with the person who's programming this as well. So these are question marks, which need answer, and I believe, in due time, not immediately, in due time they will require greater answering. I would once again thank our sponsors: one Teal, two Carasoft, three Echodyne. Thank you for backing us up at the full crew, and we're able to generate value-adding content for all interested. Let's take our discussion to Chris's selection. And Chris, you talked about the Alaska's court chatbot element. It's a sobering reality check where all the challenges that we've mentioned before has also set in. And Anthropic's new guide on demystifying evals. Evals is for evaluation for all those who are non-aviators or non-military background. So the Alaska bot was, give or take a few, I guess, 15-month-old a project that struggled with one, hallucinations, including inventing law schools. Chris, is this a failure of tech, or are we just using the wrong flight instruments to measure the AI performance? You have the floor.
Thanks. I found this a really, really interesting case study. To go back a little bit, part of the reason it's so fascinating to me is because I'm an applied AI engineer at Snorkel. So my job is to build agentic systems for federal and commercial clients. Like you said, this is an example where Alaska, a government entity here in the States, was attempting, I think really admirably, to take things to the next level, to give a consequential task to an AI system and see if they could actually build it. So my hat's off to them for the attempt. I think there's a lot that we can learn from the article and the case study it presents. Just to level set a little bit, what the system was trying to do is to help people navigate probate, which is the court process that happens after someone dies, right? So the idea was, instead of having to have a helpline that's manned by people, let's have a chatbot answer people's technical questions, procedural questions about the probate process. Like you said, it hasn't gone super fast or super smoothly for them. They haven't been able to deploy the system yet. We're 15 months in. Real challenges there. I would highlight kind of two things off the bat that I think were really interesting from the article. One was that, it really highlights the fact that you have to level set your expectations from the get-go. In the article, one of the stakeholders kind of understandably says that this system needs to be 100% accurate. That's a really high bar for an AI system. Let's be honest, that's a high bar for a human. Humans aren't 100% accurate. Yeah. So I think when we're talking about AI systems, it's really important when you're starting the process of speccing out, discovering, scoping what it is you're going to build, that you have reasonable expectations for the system. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself in a really difficult place down the road. And the second thing that I would just highlight is, in the article, they talk a lot about the process that they had for developing the evaluation system. How are we going to know when this is ready to deploy? How do we know when the answers are consistent enough and we have trust that the system's going to give good answers to the citizens that are calling in with legal questions? And they highlighted the fact that it was a very expensive task and that they ultimately weren't able to follow through just because of the investment costs. And I'd say that that's something that we all can learn from too. When you're building agentic systems, those evals are the basis of trust for your users. And if you don't have those costs built in from the get-go, it's going to be really hard to get to deployment.
Taken. So because I was going through this one as well, so there is major difficulty of AI in high stakes domains, specifics like legalities, clauses, contracts that are there. How do we work around for a solution to make that evals valid enough so that the path that it takes is able to generate responsible and predictable outputs? Your take, Chris, on this?
Yeah, it really depends on the domain. And domain here, we're talking about, are we talking about a coding task? Are we talking about a legal task? Are we talking about a medical task? Each of these domains has its own specific set of knowledge that the agent has to be able to rely on. And in this case, right, for the legal test case that Alaska was building, they had all of the documentation that Alaska, like the foundational knowledge. You can think about your policy and your legal documents, your previous case history, the procedures that Alaska uses for probate. All of that stuff was stored. And the big part of the evaluation was making sure that the agent was using that information and not random stuff off of the internet to make its decisions, right? That's what we really need to test. And so what it involves is coming up with, like they did, a valid number of questions. In the case of this particular system, they came up with 91 questions that they thought typified the range of different questions that a user might come with. And then you repeatedly run those questions over and over and over, and you have to go back and check. Did it get it right? Did it get it wrong? And then there are systems that we can use like reinforcement learning, like fine tuning to make the performance of the system more consistent and better. But you have to detect where it's making its mistakes, those error modes, before you can make those changes. And that's why evaluation is so important.
Correct. So if I take this hallucinations versus heuristics, we need to find out a good balance between the two. Near perfect solutions are not good enough in specifics like legalities and medical procedures, probate sort of thing. So that is one. I would take this to Jesse because of your military aviation background. I am sure you've heard of the infamous Swiss cheese model. Jesse, in your opinion, can they be used or this model be used for evaluating these agentic loops that we have? Your take on it?
Well, with this case, what comes to mind is I'm paraphrasing a bit, but there's I think Russians and some other ones, kind of a famous quote that talks about the U.S. war-fighting doctrine, and the paraphrase of it is that the problem is the Americans don't even follow their own published doctrine. So I also wonder in this case, what was written down, was it actually the process, or had humans kind of evolved from what they captured to the point where you couldn't even tell the two together? That I think is probably true in a lot of different domains. So that goes into quality data and what we're actually training an agent to do. So I think that one, this particular case, though, the last thing I'd say in this, I wonder if it would be interesting if that was redone in a pure private setting. And I wonder if you'd have different outputs in there, because I can think of some chats that are doing some pretty complex things right now. And then two, I wonder if there is a massive bias that was instituted by only training it off a narrow set instead of a different model. That this is where I think supervised ML still has a role, that's trained on a much broader set, and then some humans kind of at the top with that supervised ML for the fine tuning. I think there's another quote from somebody else on the West Coast right now that says software is basically dead, and now all software engineering is just ML or some kind of model refinement, which is that's not hyperbole. Like that's not hyperbole. So that's just kind of things I thought of with that. It'd be interesting for further refinement of how because the use case is interesting. We're going to want to do these things for all kinds of areas of human activity, yes. All kinds of areas. So I do wonder about the artificial restriction on limited data sets that seems well-intentioned, but it might actually be really limiting because we project things onto words from our own experiences.
Yeah. So paralysis through analysis is one side of the boat. The other side is, do we have sufficient security measures, defensive layers, as per the Swiss cheese model or the HFACS, human factor analysis classification system that we have in aviation? Dr. Marina, same topic. Question to you: can we trust a chatbot with a probate form? Something that was mentioned by Chris. Yes or no? If yes, what's the path to trusting it in a contested scenario or an airspace? What's your take on it?
Oh, I can only answer yes or no. That's going to be challenging. Maybe.
Can we trust the chatbot in specifics, in contracts, in medicinal procedures, in legal proceedings, probates, just as an example? In your opinion, is it right now at that level of maturity, or do we need to make it more mature?
Okay, right now. Right now, I think it's easier for me to say no, right? And we, I've thought about this a bit. So some of the work that we do is looking at legacy aviation use cases for AI machine learning. So, that's a really important thing. Safety critical functions are probably out for quite a bit. We
Yeah.
want to crawl, walk, run when we're starting to go through this. And so that's something that I found really interesting about this article, is that at a first glance, I didn't think that this was a high risk, application, but considering the, legal ramifications, considering
Yes.
kind of the emotional toll that this takes on people that are going through this, and maybe this is more of a kind of our medium case, and we're not necessarily totally ready for that. I think it's really important that we consider that there's also this kind of level of, this is coming from the government, and so we expect it to be 100% right? Because, well, this is the government. How could they tell me something wrong? So there's a kind of a higher, I think, expectation. And so we really want to make sure we take our time and we prove that we can do this with lower risk applications before we move forward with something that's
Correct.
going to cause
We
a little
need
bit
to
more damage.
quantify risk. That is one, and make sure we mitigate all hazards before we move forward into the real world application of this. Chris, I would certainly agree with you on that. That this is a good way forward. We need to push this idea. But something that we refer to as TRL, or technology readiness levels, from 1 to 9, we need to make it more mature. Then we push it into the real world application. Something which boggles my mind, and I would take this a step at a time with everyone. Large language models and chatbots. As we understand, chatbots have limited information, limited questions, limited answers. Large language models like ChatGPT and Google Gemini and Microsoft Copilot, blah blah blah, they have more capacity. But considering where we stand today, are we able to generate trustworthy outputs from these LLMs, and how long would it take to make it more mature in the TRL value, where it becomes more dependable, more exact, more correct if the word if the word stands its way? So the question stands: how long would it take to become, or it to become more mature, so that it is 100% accurate every time? I'll start with Chris, and I'll move this question around as well.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that the key to understanding the answer to that question is that not all systems and not all use cases are the same. And so the answer is not going to be the same across the board. The questions that I put into ChatGPT today, I have a different level of expectation than I would, like Marina said, right, than going to the DMV's website and asking a chatbot a question, right? I have a different level of expectation there. And so there's a little bit of user education that needs to go on there. But in general, if you have a use case where you need to have higher levels of accuracy, the system that is behind that has to be engineered very carefully. And the more that you can scope that, the variety of questions that are going to be input to that chat system down, the higher the level of confidence that you can ultimately have in the output, because you can Swiss cheese, as you were saying earlier. You can layer bots, you can layer systems, you can layer knowledge bases behind that, and you can do a lot more prompt engineering. So there's a lot of smart engineering that can go into assembling these systems. In general, I think that we're seeing advances far faster than I ever thought we would. I was talking with somebody just before the show about coding agents and how far they've advanced in the past, even 6 months, right? They can do things today that 6 months ago I would have said, absolutely, you should not trust them to do that. So it's very much a moving target. I think building high confidence, high consequence AI systems is something that takes a lot of time. But I do think it's something that we can do today if we're careful and we're able to scope it appropriately.
Thanks, Chris, for that input. Dr. Marina, same question. Your point of view, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think we kind of have to think about whether all of these applications are really right for AI, because that's kind of we're sort of like getting excited and throwing it at everything, right? But are all of these applications really is AI really needed, and is it appropriate? So I think that's the first question we kind of have to ask, and from there could be ways to kind of bucketize. This kind of application. Maybe we don't need this level of testing for this one, but these other ones that are more, more safety critical, or just have a high degree of, we have a lot of trust in this process. Maybe those should take a little bit longer. But I think it's something that, it's funny that we're kind of just like trying to see like, what can we do, right? But maybe we shouldn't do it all.
Yes, try and test, and trial and error is the way forward. Jesse, your point of view, your perspective, same question.
Yeah, I would rephrase the question a bit. Like I just and I think of the opportunity cost. So I would argue that already where we're at now on 10 Feb 2026, that even the kind of the basic open models that are available right now are already smarter than the smartest human on Earth already. So I think the question isn't necessarily when they get to 100%. You kind of alluded to this earlier. I think that's kind of interesting. But I don't think it's determinative of our actions on where we should put them. So if you already have something that is powerful enough that it's generally smarter, and I think you could argue, you could probably benchmark this in a lot of areas of other experts already. And we've already seen some evidence of this. So in that case, I think that's where I think it is. So the opportunity cost of not doing it, and this gets into, there's even a moral imperative here. So the moral imperative of, you have this ability to use intelligence for medical, for national security, for infrastructure, for legal proceedings, and artificially holding it back until you're at 100%. If you could zoom out to kind of like an eternal Oculus and compare that course of action versus just using it right now because it's already better than what's being done with just humans, raw human input, then I think you'd come to a different conclusion that no, there are lives to be saved and a lot of like very beneficial things that could happen across society should this be implemented quickly in different areas. A great one there's some fantastic studies on this, even on just the current state of autonomous driving, of how much better that is than a human if you aggregate it over time. If you define better as less accidents. So there's a moral imperative there. Even I think that we as society, we need to figure out this quick. And I think future generations are going to look back and say, man, there were things they could have done that would have saved a lot, and they were just too hard, too stubborn, couldn't figure it out, too old. And like Thomas Kuhn said in The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, like, we had to wait till they died off. I think in some ways that's how it'll be looked at.
Yeah, ego kills a lot of ideas on the drawing board. I tend to agree with you. Okay, so we still have a few minutes. So I would just like to go around and ask, and this is a common man's question. We've talked about LLMs, to Marina, to Jesse, but the question is, for the common man, which is the most appropriate, he or she, not for research, not for scientific blah blah blah, for common day, everyday use, which would be your choice of LLM, and why would that be your choice? Let's start with Chris. Go ahead.
And you're asking me which LLM would be for general use case?
Yes. So I'll give you options.
Okay.
Google,
Yeah,
Gemini,
sure. Gemini or
ChatGPT, or MS Copilot, DeepSeek.
Yeah.
Which one would you like the common man to use, and why?
Well, so, man, that's That feels like such an unfair question. Can I reframe it just a little bit?
Go ahead.
Let me.
We have an open house.
Yeah, my approach to this is everybody uses these tools a little bit different, and they're capable of, as Jesse alluded to earlier, a lot more than I think that we give them credit for. You just have to know some basic good practices in terms of, maybe not just trusting them blindly all the time. So what I would encourage everybody to do, and what I encourage folks to do that haven't used generative AI a whole lot, is don't just pigeonhole yourself to one. Go try out a couple of them, because they have different strengths and they do handle questions very differently.
Taken. Point taken, Chris. Dr. Marina, same question which has been rephrased by Chris. Your take, please.
Well, I'm going to go off of the list that you gave me because I think I'm learning about myself that I'm a bit risk averse, and so I worry about all the data that's going to get exposed. And so actually at CNA we built our own LLM that we can use in a secure environment where you're not going to spill data anywhere. And so I feel like that is it's called Morse code. I feel like we're going to use that internally, and I think the same I see in federal agencies. They all have their own that they've deployed, and they're in secure environments. So secure LLMs is my recommendation, because you don't really realize all the things that you could put in.
Yes, we do not realize the spillover of data. I take that. Jesse, common man, same question as rephrased by Chris. Go ahead.
Yeah, the couple things I just added was already said. One, personally, I use more than half a dozen different ones. So, all kinds. One, I'll highlight a couple things, and I'll dime one out. I have real concerns about Gemini and their data use. And if you read their user policy, their data policy, it is significantly different than the other ones. They are training on everything, and there is no opt-out option with them. I'm concerned about that. For some other things, I'm concerned about GPT's recent reporting for suicides and folks that have been talking to GPT and how it told them to go to a great, sweet, quiet place somewhere else, somebody who's right up against the line. So I'm concerned about that. And I think that's all fixable.
Yeah.
So I'm concerned about that. The last thing I'd leave with is that, and this is maybe a counter to what was just said, like, I'm also concerned about the over-isolated models in key federal governments, because I'm concerned they're just going to get farther behind and be less intelligent than what the adversaries are using. Mm-hmm. So that is concerning. So I do think there's a balance. There's security and there's super intelligence, and you may not be able to pick both. So that's just something that's what I think about.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I think you can think about maybe iteratively upgrading, right? You can, once you've evaluated that the next version is safe, you could maybe
correct, safe, secure, cybersec, all the good stuff that we keep talking of. I tend to agree with all three of you. So something which I would like to, before we go to the sponsors, so we have generative AI right now. What happens when it becomes self-generative, truly self-generative, which includes quantum intelligence, quantum computing, blah, blah, blah? Do we have, last question, with this pretext, do we have Skynet as a reality in the year 2050? Go ahead, Chris. Yes or no? Go ahead. Your perspective.
No, I don't think so. And I think that I understand the concerns, but I'll just 2 seconds on kind of background for that. Generative AI is based on human-generated data. It is doing statistical processing on the back end. You're getting an average over different outputs. I think we need to be very careful about attributing additional motive behind those statistics.
Expert opinion. Taken. Dr. Marina, your point of view. Skynet a reality 2050, yes or no, and why?
I think no, but we have the ability to kind of self-correct and to to just take a step back and to look at where we're going. So I think that if we don't want to get there, I think we can stop ourselves.
Taken. Dr. Marina, valid point. Go ahead, Jesse.
I'm going to say yes, but it depends on your kind of definition of Skynet. But I would say yes. I think we'll be at a point where the very word intelligence will mean something very different for next generation. And with the kind of, there's a lot of, advent and, a lot of very cutting edge things happening on manufacturing, on material science that are allowing the physical manifestations of agents in different domains. That is really, it's revolutionizing human activity. And I think by 2050, barring something obviously very dystopian happening like that, I think that we're in a very different kind of world. And this is why it's very challenging to give recommendations to a 16-year-old on what they should major in college. It's very challenging to think through some of that. So that when I define it that way, I think it's probably even sooner than that at our current pace.
Well, all politically correct answers taken. And certainly we are having questions that need answering, especially for the generation next that is coming up. They have a very challenging place jobs in. So that is there. I would like to thank the sponsors first. I would like to thank the sponsors, Teal, Carasoft, Ecodyne, and I would more like to thank Chris, Dr. Marina, and Jesse to have come across and given us their time, one, two, expert opinion, and able to generate value for everyone who has tuned in to this podcast. And the full crew is always looking forward to generating value for the generations to come and for everyone. Thank you once again. Any parting phrases from anyone?
Thank you. It's been a
I
pleasure.
enjoyed
so
it.
much.
I enjoyed it. Important stuff to talk about.
All right. So,
Learned a lot.
sign out. You guys take care. Have a good one. Cheers, everyone. Bye.